Hey guys, welcome back to the Fabricators Podcast. On this week's podcast, we're going to be meeting with Jordan Combs. Jordan is a trainer, and specifically an online trainer, here at SecturaSOFT. We're going to be focusing mostly on his time at Fastums, automated loading and unloading material, and how training has changed through the COVID pandemic and what he sees as the trends moving forward. Let's get started. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us and welcome back to the Fabricators Podcast. On this edition of the Fabricators Podcast, we're going to be joined by Jordan Combs. Jordan is with us here at SecturaSOFT. He's in charge of training and implementation for new customers and current customers, and he's also on our first line support. The reason why I wanted Jordan to join us here was because a few weeks back, you guys may remember, we had Matt Garbarino from Cincinnati Incorporated, and Matt was discussing how they are changing from on-site or on-premise training to now more training in the cloud, online training through different tools and utilities, such as online education videos, online tests, and really moving away from traveling around, especially with the whole COVID pandemic that's coming. And one of the big things that we've discovered is the software industry has really been in front of this for a while. We've really been doing a lot more when it comes to online things, when it comes to training, when it comes to educating customers. And now we see even the machine dealers and machine manufacturers themselves changing in this direction. So I thought it'd be great to get Jordan to join us today and just kind of go over what he's seen. He's had a lot of experience. He's come from a background outside of this space, but still in the manufacturing and fabrication sector. Worked really hands-on with a lot of different operators, a lot of different estimators out there. So we're just going to kind of pick his brain. So Jordan, thank you so much for joining us here today. I appreciate all the time. And what I was thinking about doing was just kind of kicking things off. Do you mind just kind of going over a brief background about where you came from, what your previous organization was that you worked at, and then how long you've been with Sectura?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I started my professional careers kind of in the automation industry. I worked for a company by the name of Fastums. I did remote support for US, Canada, and Mexico primarily, as well as on-site trainings for operators to operate this automated line. So it's a kind of a different atmosphere there, as those trainings were in fact on site because we were dealing with machinery. It's one of the things where, since now being at SecturaSOFT, we deal with software, is we can do these things remote through a meeting room. It makes things a little bit easier. You can get those trainings kind of done a little bit faster. I worked at Fastums for about, let's say, 4 or 5 years, and then came over here around this time last year. So I've been here about a year so far.
And how's that transition taking place? At Fastums, it seems like, you were kind of one-on-one with the organizations and the customers themselves. And now that we're doing this, virtually, do you see kind of a different impact? Do you see the ability to connect to more individuals at once rather than being on-prem? What's kind of the big difference that you see from here to compared to machine dealers?
I think being on-prem doing training gets, you can be a little bit more personal with the people you're training. They see you face to face. You kind of get to know them a little bit. And then there is the benefits of doing remote trainings is that you can have a lot more participants and give everybody the same kind of attention through a meeting room and talking like this, versus if I were to be on-prem and have a class of 20 people, not everybody's going to be able to see what I'm doing. Not everybody's going to get a chance to drive or do everything. But remote, and especially with working with a platform like ours, when we do our trainings, everybody can be logged into the system. Everybody can be clicking along with me, doing everything that I'm doing, and have the ability to talk amongst themselves and come up with questions. I think it shows a lot more involvement, especially when you can have 20 plus people in a training room, really brainstorming together and all being able to see and actively participate.
So you see a lot of benefits from, obviously, yeah, you do definitely lose out in that personal, and I see the same thing too, right?
Yeah.
From kind of sales perspective, I love going on prem. I love shaking hands and meeting with people.
Yep.
Just especially with this whole COVID thing, we don't have those, luxuries anymore at this point in time. But you do see some benefits from online training where you can actually pass kind of the puck, as they call it, where you can pass it along and they can go through and demonstrate for you what they've learned rather than everybody getting their hands on one computer. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think you also have an easier time scheduling when you're on prem. Typically, what happened in my previous experience is you were booked for the whole day, and so you had to work around these schedules, and these companies would have to shift all of their personnel around to make sure that these 4 to 8 people were available 5 days out of that week, 8 to 10 hours a day to make sure that all the training was done. As far as the remote trainings go, though, they can kind of fall whenever. They don't take as long, um, and we can work around schedules a lot better. We're not taking out a whole day of people's times to do this. I think
Well,
is
but
very,
that
very helpful.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me up to, one of the points that we talk about a lot inside of here is while the training and we can fall at any point in time, which is a huge benefit, right? And less travel time, we can get more training accomplished. People can get hands on. At the same time, when we take a look at customers themselves, I know that one of the things that we talk about is if you were on prem and they paid for your plane ticket, paid for your stay, they paid for your meals, they would look at that training as, we have to go through this. This is our opportunity to train our guys, and we're going to allocate the time to do that. However, when it comes to, remote training, things kind of shift around pretty easily, right? I mean, what do you experience? I mean, when it comes to that, and what kind of, if you were talking to a president of the organization, and he wanted to get his guys trained online, versus on prem, what would you kind of preface things with, and how would you prep them to make sure they got the most out of that?
Well, I'd first make sure that everybody had access to the platform. I think that's the primary focus there, is to make sure that when those training sessions happen and when they complete, is that we're able to actually get the customer or the trainees involved in using the software. And it comes to the thing where people always say practice makes perfect. I don't really believe in that. I believe practice makes permanent. And if you build up that muscle memory of clicking the right buttons, doing the math, and figuring out if those numbers and those times line up to what you expect to see on the floor, doing that and repeating it over and over again tends to get the customers and the trainees up and running faster. I think one, getting them involved; two, giving them exercises and worksheets, maybe not paperwork, but have
Yeah,
them upload a bunch of DXFs and apply these secondary operations and take what we did in that session and then put it in their hands and have them work through it on their own. And that
applying it.
also gives them the ability to generate their own questions that they might not have come up with watching someone do it. So
Yeah.
doing is definitely a lot better than just watching someone do something.
Yeah, and making sure that they're taking advantage of the training, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
like, I think we talk about that all the time. Where, hey, man, if we were on prem and it would make no sense. If it's the day of and we have half the people in, half the people out, and they're kind of taking it half serious. I think where we see people succeed the most is where they take it serious. They take exactly what you just said. They apply the basics and apply what you teach them, and in the real world sense. Right afterwards. And I think, taking the training just as if you were sitting right next to them. And it's not just an online watch session, it's a session to get engaged and involved with.
Yeah.
Um, no, I think that's great. One other thing that I wanted to touch on, I know that we've done a lot more around, online support when it comes to materials, support materials when it comes to training. You had a great idea around homework. How do we call it homework here, but how do you give them tasks afterwards? And we also have a lot of videos. Have you seen those new, online repositories where we're putting in a lot of videos, where we're putting in tests, things like that for customers, even outside our trainers being directly involved? Are you seeing those having an impact and being helpful at all? And what would you recommend for others that are looking into a solution like that?
I definitely see them as being helpful, but they're only as helpful, if they do them. So it's to make it kind of important. I always ask, did you guys by any chance watch the videos, go through the online training, just to kind of tally up the, who did, who didn't kind of thing, to see how those progress differently. And I do see a very, very large difference with the people that go through those videos. Half the time when we started doing those homeworks, I would come into training session one, and there's already quotes in the system that weren't created by me. That was something that never used to happen. It was a very rare occurrence that without that homework, that someone was going to get in and actually have a quote with a dollar amount,
Yeah.
which means that they successfully added something. Whether or not it's a standard shape, PDF, DXF, they were able to successfully get something on that quote. Before the homework, you didn't see that much. After the homework, you started seeing a lot more, and people actually had questions to bring to the table before you even started the training. So you would start the training and say, so after you've watched those videos, do you guys have anything that you want to ask about, anything specific that you want me to go over? And half the time you can drive the training off of that homework.
Yeah. So having those, and I think we talk about this all the time, and I think that you are probably the biggest proponent for this, right? Is taking these solutions that companies have built, the trainings, the online training, the online, the one-on-one training, and taking them just as serious as any other training. So I think a lot of people, they feel that if the training is an ad hoc training video that they'll see at any time and they'll click through it and not watch it all the way, right? Or they'll have a meeting set up with a trainer, and a half hour before, they realize that they might miss lunch, so they want to go grab a bite. But typically they wouldn't do that if you were sitting right in front of them, right? And that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing that I think that we talk about. We talked about this with Matt Garbarino. I think a great thing that you bring up all the time here and internally is just, it's hard to convey just how important that the training is and how they need to take it, just as how customers, if they want to be successful, take it just as serious as if it was an actual training class that they're sitting in, for them to be successful. Um, and so, yeah. So Jordan, I appreciate you joining me here on the Fabricators Podcast. I think the overarching idea is for customers to be successful. I mean, would you agree to say for customers to be successful, training is probably one of the number one key point, and to make sure that they take advantage of all the different training solutions that customers or providers provide to them, I guess vendors provide to them.
Yes, 100% yes.
And yeah, okay, and that's like, one of the big things that I think that we I've kind of conveyed a few times on this podcast. So I just thought you'd be great individual to have me join in here. So Jordan, I know you're not a big podcast guy. I know this wasn't something you were looking forward to. So for anybody listening, I appreciate you hopping in here, Jordan, giving us your time and giving us some feedback and what you're seeing front line. And I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. See you, Jordan. Thank you.
Yep, bye.